There is no silence more profound than the silence of a church sanctuary right before a scandal breaks. You can hear the dust motes dancing in the stained glass light. You can hear the wooden pews creaking under the weight of Sunday best suits. And on that particular Sunday, you could hear my heart breaking, amplified by 4,000 watts of audio power, blasting through the speakers I had installed myself. Before I tell you exactly how a single Bluetooth connection destroyed 2 marriages and rocked our entire town, I have a small favor to ask. If you believe that the truth always comes to light, no matter how hard people try to hide it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share these stories with the world. Also, I love connecting with you. So tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? I read every single one. Now let's go back to the moment the microphone went live. My name is Grace. For 20 years, I wasn't just a member of the First Baptist Church. I was its nervous system. I ran the audio-visual booth. I controlled the lights, the microphones, the live streams. I was the invisible woman in the back, making sure the pastor sounded like God and the choir sounded like angels. My husband, Deacon Paul, was the face. He was the man in the front row, lifting his hands in worship, shaking every hand at the door, organizing the charity drives. He was the gold standard of a Christian husband, or so I thought. They say pride comes before a fall, but in my case, the fall didn't come from pride. It came from a Bluetooth connection, a sticky end call button, and a conversation that was never meant to leave the front seat of a Lexus. If you think you know pain, try standing in a sound booth, looking out at 300 people you love, and watching their faces turn from confusion to horror as your husband's voice, the voice you trusted with your life, fills the room with the most filth imaginable. And the worst part, it wasn't just what he was doing, it was who he was doing it with. To understand the magnitude of the disaster, you have to understand the players. Paul and I were the power couple of the church. We didn't have children. God hadn't blessed us in that department. So the church became our child. We poured our money, our time, and our souls into that building. Paul was the head deacon. He was the man people went to for marriage counseling when the pastor was busy. And then there was Pastor John and his wife, Rebecca. Pastor John was a good man, soft-spoken, kind, maybe a little naive, but Rebecca was the first lady of the church in every sense. She was beautiful, younger than John by 10 years, always draped in designer dresses. She sang the solos in the choir. She led the women's ministry. I admired her. I envied her a little. She seemed to have it all. I didn't know that she was using that voice to seduce my husband. The cracks started showing about 6 months ago, though I was too blind to see them. Paul started having a lot of late-night deacons meetings. He started volunteering for committees that Rebecca was leading. "I just want to support the pastor's vision," Paul would say, kissing me on the forehead as he walked out the door. "Rebecca needs help organizing the spring gala. You know John isn't good with logistics." I was serving the Lord too, but I was doing it in the back of the sanctuary, rewiring the soundboard. I was the tech geek. I lived in the shadows. I liked it there. It gave me a view of everything. But the one thing the sound booth couldn't pick up was the whispers happening in the church parking lot after I had gone home. The day it happened was Easter Sunday, the biggest service of the year. The sanctuary was packed. Extra chairs were set up in the aisles. There were lilies everywhere. The air smelled of perfume and starch. I was in the booth, wearing my headset, stressed out of my mind. The live stream was glitching, and the choir mics were feeding back. Pastor John's voice came over my headset, asking if everything was ready. I told him we were good, but when he asked for Paul, my stomach tightened. He's running late, Pastor," I lied. "He had an emergency." That's what Paul had told me that morning. He had rushed out of the house at 6 a.m. looking frantic, claiming his elderly mother in the next town over had slipped in the shower. "I have to go, Grace," Paul had said. "I might miss the service. You hold down the fort." So there I was, alone in the booth, managing the biggest service of the year without my husband. At 5 minutes before the service began, my phone buzzed. It was sitting on the mixing console, plugged into the auxiliary input via a cable. I used my phone to play the pre-service background music, soft instrumental hymns to set the mood. I looked at the screen. Incoming call. Hubby. I panicked. The music was playing from the phone. If I answered, the music would stop. I quickly faded the master volume down so the church wouldn't hear the ringtone. I swiped answer and put the phone to my ear, keeping it plugged into the board, but with the mute button engaged. Paul? I whispered. Is Mom okay? Grace. Paul's voice sounded breathless, rushed. Yeah, Mom is fine. False alarm. Just a bruise. Oh, thank God. I exhaled. Are you coming? Service starts in 4 minutes. No, I can't make it back in time, Paul said. I'm going to stay and make her lunch. Ensure she's settled. I feel terrible missing Easter. It's okay, I said, feeling a surge of love for this man who cared so much for his mother. You're doing the right thing. Love you, Grace. Love you too. I tapped the red end call button on my screen. Or at least, I thought I did. My fingers were sweaty from the stress. I tapped the screen, but at that exact moment, the pastor signaled me from the stage to start the welcome video. In my rush, I didn't verify the call had ended. I just threw the phone down on the mixing desk. Then, I did the routine I had done 1,000 times. I unmuted the aux channel. I pushed the fader up to 0. I intended to fade the background music back in for the final 2 minutes before the service started. But the music app had paused because of the call. And the call was still active. The end call tap hadn't registered. And because Paul was driving, his phone didn't disconnect immediately either. I pushed the fader up. The speakers, capable of reaching every corner of the room, hissed to life. For a moment, there was just the sound of wind and road noise. Then, a voice boomed through the sanctuary. It was crisp, clear, high definition. Is she off the line? It was Paul's voice. 300 heads turned. People looked around, confused. Was this part of the service? Was this a skit? I froze. I stared at the phone. The call timer was still ticking. I reached out to mute it. I should have muted it. It was my job to mute it. But then I heard the second voice. Good God, Paul. You almost gave me a heart attack. Why did you call her? The hand that was reaching for the mute button stopped in midair. I knew that voice. Every person in that room knew that voice. It was the voice that sang the O Holy Night solo every Christmas. It was Rebecca, the pastor's wife. The sanctuary went deathly silent, the kind of silence where you can hear a pin drop on carpet. Pastor John, who was standing on the stage adjusting his sermon notes, froze. He looked up at the ceiling, as if the voice was coming from God himself. Through the speakers, we heard the sound of a car door slamming, the rustle of clothes. I had to call her, Paul's voice boomed again, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. She was expecting me at church. I had to give her the mom excuse so we could have the afternoon. The mom excuse? Rebecca giggled. It was a cruel, girlish sound. You're terrible. She bought it? Grace buys anything I tell her. Paul laughed. She's a good technician, but she's not exactly a detective. She thinks I'm a saint. My blood turned to ice. I stood there in the booth, paralyzed. My assistant, a teenager named Tyler, looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. He reached for the master fader. Don't touch it, I whispered. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an instinct, a primal need to know the truth. So, Rebecca's voice purred through the speakers. We have 3 hours before you have to drive back. That motel off the interstate? The one where nobody knows us? I already booked the room, Paul said. Room 204, same as last Tuesday. A collective gasp swept through the church. Last Tuesday? Tuesday was Bible study night. Paul led the men's group. Rebecca led the women's group. I love Tuesday, Rebecca sighed. I hate sneaking around, Paul. When are you going to leave her? You promised. You said once Easter was over. I know. Paul sounded annoyed. It's complicated, baby. Grace handles all the finances. She handles the rental properties. If I leave her now, she gets half. I need to move the assets first. I need a few more months to hide the money. Hide the money. I gripped the edge of the mixing console so hard my knuckles turned white. Well, hurry up, Rebecca snapped. I can't stand sleeping in the same bed as John anymore. He's so soft. He prays for me before bed, Paul. It makes me sick. I want a real man. On stage, Pastor John dropped his Bible. It hit the floor with a loud thud that the microphone picked up. He looked like he had been shot in the chest. His face was grey. He was staring at the speakers, tears streaming down his face. The congregation was in shock. Some mothers were covering their children's ears. Others were pulling out their phones, recording the audio. "Don't worry about John," Paul said. "He's a clueless shepherd, and Grace is just the help. They'll never know what hit them. By the time I serve her the papers, I'll have the bank accounts drained and we'll be in Cancun." "Cancun," Rebecca moaned. "God, I need a drink." "Did you bring the wine?" "Bottle of Merlot in the back seat," Paul said. "Communion wine isn't strong enough for what I want to do to you." That was the breaking point. Mrs. Higgins, the 80-year-old church matriarch sitting in the front row, stood up and screamed, "Lord, have mercy!" The spell broke. The sanctuary erupted into chaos. People were shouting. Men were standing up, looking furious. And in the booth, I finally looked down at my phone. The call timer was at 3 minutes. I looked at the mute button. I looked at the stage. Pastor John was on his knees, weeping. I looked at the congregation. They were looking back at me. They knew I was in the booth. They knew I was the one controlling the sound. They were waiting for me to cut the feed. But I didn't cut the feed. I grabbed the microphone, the voice of God mic that we used for announcements. I pressed the talk button. My voice overrode theirs, but I kept their line open underneath, so they could hear me too. "Paul," I said. My voice boomed through the church, and simultaneously through the Bluetooth connection in his car. On the speakers, we heard the rustling stop instantly. "What?" Paul's voice came through, sounding confused. "Grace, is that you? Why do you sound so loud?" "I'm on the PA system, Paul," I said, my voice steady, cold, and terrifyingly calm. "You're on the main speakers." At the church, dead silence from the car. "The entire congregation is here, Paul," I continued. "The deacons are here. The choir is here. Your clueless shepherd John is here. And we all just heard about room 204. We heard about the money you're hiding. And we heard what Rebecca thinks of her husband's prayers. Grace," Paul's voice was a squeak now. "Grace, wait. It's not. I can explain. It's a joke. We were rehearsing a skit." "A skit about embezzlement and adultery?" I asked. "I don't think that's in the bulletin, Paul." I looked out at the crowd. The anger in the room was palpable. It was a holy wrath. "Don't bother coming to the motel," I said, "and don't bother coming home, because by the time you get back from your mum's house, the locks will be changed, the bank accounts will be frozen, and John—" I looked at the pastor. He stood up. He wiped his face. He walked to the pulpit. He looked into the camera that was live streaming to the world. He looked stronger than I had ever seen him. "John," I finished, "is going to have a very interesting conversation with the police about the church funds you just admitted to stealing." I heard Rebecca scream in the background of the call. "Hang up! Hang up the phone, you idiot!" The line went dead, but the damage was done. The silence returned to the sanctuary, but it wasn't the silence of anticipation anymore. It was the silence of a battlefield after the bomb has dropped. I took off my headset. I laid it on the mixing console. I walked out of the booth and down the center aisle. The congregation parted for me like the Red Sea. Hands reached out to touch my shoulder, to offer comfort. I walked straight to the altar where Pastor John was standing. We looked at each other. Two people whose lives had just been incinerated by the two people we trusted most. "I'm sorry, John," I whispered. "No," John said, his voice trembling but firm. "The truth sets us free, Grace, even when it burns. We didn't have a service that day, but we did have a reckoning. And Paul, he thought the humiliation was over because he hung up the phone. He was wrong, because I had recorded the live stream, and the internet never forgets. The hour following the live stream was a blur of chaos and eerie calm. While the deacons were ushering the shocked congregation out of the sanctuary, I wasn't crying. I was calculating. I went straight to the church office with Pastor John. We didn't speak. We just sat at his computer. I pulled the live stream footage from the cloud server and saved it to 3 different hard drives. Paul thought hanging up the phone ended the nightmare, but I was making sure the evidence would live forever. By the time I drove home, the adrenaline had faded into a cold, hard resolve. I didn't go home to weep into my pillow. I went home to execute the promise I had made over the loudspeakers. I called a locksmith on the way. He was a member of the choir. He had heard everything. He met me at the driveway with his tools and a look of grim determination. We changed every lock in the house in under 40 minutes. Then I sat in the living room, in Paul's favorite leather armchair, and I waited. I knew he would come. A narcissist never believes he has truly lost control. He thinks he can talk his way out of anything. At 2 p.m., the Lexus pulled into the driveway. Paul didn't park. He abandoned the car. He ran up the walkway, his face a mask of sweat and panic. He tried the front door. Locked. He tried his key. It didn't turn. He started pounding on the wood. "Grace, open the door. You're making a scene. Open this door right now." I didn't move. I just watched him through the window. He looked pathetic. The silver-haired saint of Oak Creek was now just a desperate man in a wrinkled suit, locked out of the castle he thought he owned. When he realized I wasn't opening the door, he ran to the window and pressed his face against the glass. "Grace, listen to me. It was a misunderstanding. Rebecca, she's crazy. She's obsessed with me. I was just playing along to get information. I was trying to save John." I picked up my phone and held it up so he could see the screen. I wasn't recording him. I was showing him a notification. It was from our bank. Transfer complete. $0 remaining balance. His eyes went wide. He stopped banging. You see, Paul had made a critical error in his master plan. He told Rebecca he needed a few more months to hide the money. He assumed I was the clueless help. But as the bookkeeper for our rental properties, my name was on every single account. And while he was driving back from the motel, panicked and screaming at Rebecca, I had logged into our joint accounts and transferred every single penny into a separate trust account under my maiden name, a safety measure my lawyer father had set up for me years ago. "You stole my money!" he screamed through the glass. "That's my money!" "It's our money, Paul," I said, though he couldn't hear me. "And now, it's my legal defense fund." I didn't have to talk to him for long because the sirens started wailing. 3 police cruisers pulled up to the curb. Pastor John hadn't gone home to cry either. He had gone to the precinct. When Paul admitted on the live stream that he was stealing church funds to run away to Cancun, he confessed to a felony. The police didn't need a warrant. They had a confession broadcast to 3,000 people. I watched as 2 officers walked up the driveway. Paul spun around, trying to put on his deacon face. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Paul said, straightening his tie. "My wife is having a mental breakdown. She's locked me out of my own home." The officer didn't smile. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Paul Vance, you are under arrest for embezzlement and grand larceny regarding the First Baptist Church Building Fund. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The look on Paul's face was worth every tear I had shed in the last 10 years. It wasn't regret. It was pure, unadulterated shock. He was being held accountable for the first time in his life. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, he looked at the window. He saw me standing there. I didn't wave. I just closed the blinds. But the story didn't end with Paul in handcuffs. The other half of the equation, Rebecca, was about to face a judgment much harsher than the law. Rebecca didn't go to jail that day. She went home to face John. I learned later what happened from John himself. He told me he was sitting at their kitchen table when she walked in. She had tried to fix her makeup, tried to look like the victim. She walked in weeping, throwing herself at his feet. "Oh, John, forgive me. Paul forced me. He threatened me. He said he would ruin your reputation if I didn't do what he said." I was scared. John looked at her. The soft-spoken, naive man was gone. In his place was a man who had heard his wife call him soft and clueless to the entire world. He didn't yell. He didn't quote scripture. He simply placed a suitcase on the table. "I packed your things," John said. "But this is my house," Rebecca shrieked. "You can't kick me out." "The parsonage belongs to the church, Rebecca," John said quietly. "And as of an hour ago, the Board of Deacons voted unanimously to terminate your role in all ministries. You are trespassing." "Where will I go?" she cried. Paul is in jail. I have nowhere to go. John stood up and walked to the door. He opened it. You have a voice, Rebecca, he said. You have beauty, and you have your freedom. I suggest you use them to find a job, because you will never sing in this town again. Rebecca left. She tried to go to a hotel, but in a small town like Oak Creek, news travels faster than light. The clerk at the front desk had been watching the live stream. He told her they were fully booked. She ended up driving 3 towns over, sleeping in her car. The legal battle that followed was swift and brutal. Because I had the recording of Paul admitting to hiding assets to defraud me in a divorce, the judge granted me an emergency freeze on everything. Paul had no money for a high-powered lawyer. He had to use a public defender. The audit of the church finances revealed that Paul had stolen over $200,000 from the orphan fund over 5 years. He wasn't just an adulterer, he was stealing from children. That detail turned the few people who might have supported him into his fiercest enemies. He took a plea deal to avoid a 20-year sentence. He got 5 years in state prison. I visited him once, about a month after his sentencing. I sat behind the glass partition. He looked older. The silver hair was dull. The expensive suit was replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Grace, he whispered, please, put money on my commissary books. I need toothpaste. I need soap. I looked at the man I had washed socks for, cooked for, and loved for 25 years. I felt a twinge of pity, but then I remembered the laughter in the car. I remembered him calling me the help. I can't do that, Paul, I said. Why not? You have all the money. Because, I smiled, leaning into the microphone. I donated it. He froze. What? The settlement, I said. My half. Your half. All of it. I donated it to the church to replace what you stole. And the rest? I started a scholarship fund for women who need to get back on their feet after leaving abusive marriages. You gave it all away, he choked out. Every cent, I said. I have my job. I have my house. I don't need your dirty money. I stood up to leave. Grace, he screamed, slamming his fist against the glass. You can't leave me here with nothing. I'm your husband. I turned back one last time. No, Paul, you're just a glitch in the audio. And I finally fixed the mix. I walked out of the prison and into the sunshine. It has been a year since that Easter Sunday. The church has recovered. Pastor John is still preaching, though he preaches with a little more fire now, a little more wisdom. We aren't together. That would be too cliché, but we are friends. Real friends. Rebecca moved to the city. I heard she's singing in a lounge bar near the airport. It's a far cry from the solo at the Easter service, but at least she has an audience. As for me, I'm still in the sound booth. Every Sunday I put on my headset. I check the levels. I check the mics. And every time I see a husband and wife sitting in the front row, holding hands a little too tightly, looking a little too perfect, I just smile and push the fader up. Because if there is one thing I learned, it's that the truth always has a way of getting loud. You just have to be ready to listen. Thank you for listening to my story. Now, I have a question for you, and I want you to be completely honest. Pastor John kicked Rebecca out onto the street with nothing but a suitcase, even though she claimed she was manipulated. Some people say he was too harsh, that a man of God should have offered forgiveness and counseling. Others say she got exactly what she deserved. If you were in John's shoes, would you have tried to save your wife, or would you have packed her bags? Tell me your opinion in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that character is what you do when you think no one is listening, please share this video with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your microphone muted.